we're set possibly for a major overhaul, with the government, of course, fleshing out at least some discussions on this, some pretty serious ones. You have at the moment enterprise bargaining agreements being struck, but they're knocked out, even though both sides are happy with them. The Fair Work Commission does it on what seems to be basically a technicality. We do have a problem with the system at the moment, don't we?
Well, I don't think the problems with the system, whatever they may be, what has got us into the current recession that we're in. And so I disagree with the Prime Minister's presumption that some changes to the system and changes to the rules are going to be a pathway out. I think that's an attempted diversion from the fact the PM doesn't have a plan himself. So, but coming to your question about the problems that might exist, look, if it's about delays in getting agreements approved, then I think everyone agrees that there should be a way of ensuring that there's not those delays. But if it's about the agreements not meeting the test, then I have a different view, which is that what we've seen in the past is some agreements getting approved that turn out to hurt a lot of workers because they end up getting paid less than what they would have done had they been on the award. And I think, if anything, there's a case for strengthening some of the tests that are in there to ensure that people don't fall below the legal minimum.
When we look at it, and a big focus, though, if you're talking about the test, the Better Off Overall test, I mean, if you have a whole lot of workers under an agreement that are better off and a whole lot that are no worse off, surely there's nothing wrong with that agreement.
Yeah, but some might be worse off. And what we've found is that casual workers and younger workers have been the ones who've often lost out of some of these poor deals that have been struck. And the Greens want to make sure that every casual worker and every low-paid worker has their rights fully protected. And so if legislation comes out of this process, then we'll be looking at it very carefully to ensure that people can't fall behind, because I'm worried that people are falling behind already, and there's a prospect of them falling even further behind. But look, again, I come back to the main point here. The Prime Minister is presenting this as some kind of pathway out of the crisis that we're in at the moment. It's not what got us into the crisis. I don't think these reforms that he's mooting are going to create one single new job. What is needed here is government investment and a government plan to avoid us falling off a cliff in September and to guide us out, a government-led plan of investment and action. And the government's just refusing to do this. And so instead, the Prime Minister's got this phone-a-friend approach where he says, I'll bring some people into the room and hope that they come up with an answer, when every economist and the Greens are saying, no, we need government investment.
Well, it's a bit more than that. The government's saying that it's got its own solution. It just wants to, get some people in the room that have a vested interest, obviously. Yes, this didn't get us into this crisis, but, we can't do much about that. That's COVID-19. Again, I just want to ask you about the extent of the problem here and sympathy whether or not you have it for small business. You have 14 potential hourly rates just within hospitality, 61 adult classifications, and even the very high-profile case of George Calombaris. He got in a special auditor. They found he was paying a whole large group of employees, underpaying them. There was another group he was overpaying, and they don't get that money back. So complication is a killer here, isn't it?
Does anyone ever run the same argument about the tax system? Does any business ever get away with saying, oh, I'm sorry, the tax laws are so complicated, you should give me a break for not having paid my taxes for the last few years? No, the ATO would be on them like a ton of bricks, and people engage accountants and lawyers to ensure that they comply with all of their tax laws. And I think it should be the same with industrial relations. We've already been through many years of award modernisation and award simplification in this country. Awards have been stripped back both in number and what's able to be in them. We've never really recovered from work choices. The legal flaws in this country, as in FLOORS, that are sitting there in the awards at the moment, are so low for many workers. You could be working full-time on an award minimum wage, and if you've got kids, you could be living in poverty. We've got fewer protections in there than we've probably had at any time in history, and now businesses saying, let's strip it back even further. It's like, well, if you're running a business and you've got the capacity to engage lawyers to give you tax advice, you should have the capacity to engage people to give you industrial relations advice as well, to ensure your workers are paid fairly.
I'm just going to interrupt there. Just on big business and this underpaying element, the government's talking as well about compliance. They're not letting these people off the hook. What I'm asking you as well is small business, that it might not be too hard to work out their taxes, but it's really hard to figure out all these different awards to be able to pay to different employees depending on what level they're at, whether they're taking out meals or whether they're washing up dishes or what time they started, what time they ended. Again, don't you have any sympathy for what they're running here? If they're telling people, small business owners, this is really complicated, it's hard to know if I'm paying my staff accurately, don't we have a problem?
Well, there's an easy way of dealing with that, which is to expand the advice that the federal government can offer, including to small businesses and to workers, so that there's a place to go to ask that question beforehand, to say, look, I want some help with interpreting this. But look, I used to, before I came into this job, I worked as an industrial relations lawyer for about 12 years, and I saw awards get stripped back and stripped back and stripped back to the point where they are a shadow of their former selves. Now, the idea that the 20-odd pages that might be in some awards that are meant to cover the whole range of someone's professional, their working lives, all of their protections, the idea that that is now somehow too much and too onerous is not a proposition that I agree with. If there's, yes, the government could do more in ensuring that everyone can get advice on how to implement the award in their circumstance. But having seen at close quarters what has happened to the basic legal protections to people in this country over many, many years and seen them cut away and stripped back, I can't agree with the proposition that they've got to be stripped back further. And as I say, it's not going to create one job. I mean, the government, the Prime Minister says he's the job maker. No, he's a job taker and a job faker. We are losing jobs hand over fist in the university sector and the arts sector at the moment. So if the government wanted to do something to stop people joining the unemployment queues, they could do it right now and stop jobs being lost. And he's a job faker because this won't create additional work. Everyone is saying we need government to get in, use the cheapest borrowing in history to invest in nation building and planet saving projects to help us get out of this mess. And that's what the Prime Minister should be doing.
Are you saying that when you talk about your experience with awards and them being stripped out, that you'd like to see some of them become more complicated? We need to add more pages to them?
For more protections for workers in this country. There's been a lot of exploitation of casual workers in particular, rising job insecurity. We've seen too many people get underpaid and get ripped off. We've seen people through, people who are working earning $4 or $5 an hour making clothes in some of the back suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney, being told to register themselves as independent businesses so that they don't have to get paid the award rate. I think a lot of people in this country are falling through the cracks. I think there's a case for a more simple approach, which is to say that everyone who does work in this country should get paid the legal minimum. I think that's a very simple approach that at the moment, because of the holes in so many awards, and because of the sham contracting arrangements that go on, mean that too many people fall through the cracks, and it's those cracks that I'm interested in filling.